Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 30th episode of The Inbox, and before we get started on this one, I'd like to say thank you, first off, for being a part of this series, to get 30 episodes in, which has been incredibly fun to do, and I'd like to just keep it going because, like I said, it's a lot of fun. I think we get a lot of interaction in, and thumbs up to all of that. The other thing before I start this one is, it's summer in St. Louis, meaning it's the allergens here are kicking my ass, so I'm probably going to clear my throat in this a couple times, so just a heads up, so you know going into this. So we're going to start off the first question today with VW99er, who says, how do you feel about the space combat in the game at the moment? Right now, from my experience, it feels like we're just flying around in circles or charging towards each other. What's your current opinion, and what do you expect and want to change? Yeah, I mean, I would say for the most part, you've got it down right. I mean, there's really two core principles that people kind of abide by right now in dogfighting, and that's either you circle strafe or you end up doing the jousting. And sometimes you get people, like one person's doing one thing while the other person's doing the other thing. And then you get some people that try and do it a little bit more, I don't know, advanced or erratic. And it's kind of mixing the two up. And some of it's going to depend on the type of ship that you're in, and it's going to dictate how you end up playing to some extent. So, you know, a ship like the Vanguard isn't real maneuverable, you know, left, right, up, or down. It's got decent speed in a straight line. It's got a lot of forward-facing weaponry. You shouldn't really expect to be circle strafing in a Vanguard, so that's going to be a ship that's doing more of that boom and zoom, especially once you get into the open universe. However, a ship like an M50, it doesn't have the durability to do something like, the jousting. So it does a lot better relying on that maneuverability to end up kind of strafing around its competition and trying to stay out of the firing arcs. So those are the two, and I think you're right. That is what we're going to see. But I think as far as what do I expect to change, I think we're going to see a slight change once we get to fights in the universe as opposed to Arena Commander, because there's different things to consider. You know, there's not going to be people that are willing to stick it out in a fight until their ship is completely destroyed, because that comes with cost, that comes with time effort. There's a lot of things you lose when you die. So there's going to be a change in the aggressive nature of players and how they play to a certain extent. Also, as you get larger ships in there and you get larger fleet battles, things have to change. You know, you're not going to be able to sit there and circle strafe one target when that target has three wingmen that are trying to help them. You know, you have to be more adaptable. You have to use cover. And I think those are things that we're going to see, whether that be flying back to a larger support ship so they can get turrets on your chaser to help you out, whether that be flying to an asteroid or to a space station to get away and break that line of fire. Those are the types of things that I'm expecting and I want to change, just because I think it provides a larger scope of battle. You know, one-on-one in the universe, yeah, it's probably going to be like it is in Arena Commander, except you'll probably eventually have one person that tries to bug out. The question is whether they live or die. David Bland says, what are the chances of VR support? High, confirmed. It's worked before, it will work again. Space sims like this, and really flight sims in general, they're games that really are a great audience for those that want to use things like Oculus or Rift or that's the same thing, or Vive, or any of the other ones that come out. So, CR's already talked about it. It's something that we're going to see in game. It's just a matter of when it's going to be kind of natural and built in and actually fully supported. But it is definitely going to happen. D. Lopez, will there be a survival aspect to the game like hunger? I don't think we're going to actually see hunger as a game mechanic, but there's going to be certain survival aspects like rest has been one that's been mentioned before. That's part of the reason why ships had beds initially, because you needed to make sure that your character could sleep and they wouldn't become, drowsy. That being said, beds now seem to be more of a log-off point, but that's also been kind of a waffling aspect as well. There's going to be a certain level of realism where you have to do certain things for your character, but it's always going to be about gameplay being more fun than being realistic. So you're not going to have to, keep your ship on autopilot and go use the restroom every 2 hours to make sure your character is okay. Instead it may be, and I don't think it's also going to be as absurd as, I got shot in the arm, so I'm going to eat a cheeseburger and I'm going to be healed. There's going to be something in there that kind of adds a new level of depth. The question is what it's going to be. So there's going to be something, but it's probably not going to be, arbitrary things like A fixes B outside of maybe like I'm drowsy, so my character gets a little bit, or blacks out a little bit faster, so I need to take a 20-minute cat nap or something like that. That may be there, but we'll just have to see. Raid Cloud 123 Gaming question: me and my friends are getting into the game and want to start a clan or an organization. There's 9 of us and we want a command ship. What do you recommend? P.S. Congratulations on the baby. Best of luck. Thank you. It's very exciting for us. So here's the thing with a command ship. If you're talking about an organization with 9 people and you want a command ship, the question then becomes, do you envision that organization becoming bigger, or do you envision it staying with you and your 9 friends? Because if you're talking about a 9-person organization, you don't really need a big command ship. You know, you could get a Polaris and all 9 of you could operate the Polaris, Corvette, but there's nothing to really command. You're commanding that one ship. You're not commanding your fleet. But if you're talking about, 9 of you and you want to have a variety of ships, then I would say something simple like like a Hornet Tracker, for example, might be a good option. Or maybe a Constellation Andromeda, which we've heard about a command and control module potentially being available for. Like that, those types of things are things you need to consider, because you can get a really big command ship, but you're going to need a lot of people or NPCs to crew it, and if you don't have supporting cast of ships, then it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. Now, if you're talking about growing your fleet, then I would encourage you to watch my command and control video, because that's the one where I actually talk about different ships that I think fit that role based on like size of organization. So in that we see things like the Hornet Tracker on the small end, Constellation Andromeda, we see potentially the Carrack, potentially the Caterpillar. There's other ships, maybe like the 890 Jump. There's other ships that I think fit that role, but there's a lot of other factors that go into it, and I would need more information about what your goals as an organization are and how big you really want to be. Spaceman Tyler says, question about exploration. If you discovered a system and decided to keep it a secret, would it be possible for others to discover the system too? Like discovering an organization's secret base, then trying to sell the info on that location while dodging said organization's assassins. I think it would be an interesting concept, but also a pain if it's easy to find systems. I don't think it's ever going to be easy to find systems. I think that's going to be one of the more challenging, or kind of the pinnacle of exploration. You find a new system and you probably become somewhat famous in game. So when we start talking about this, yes, I think anybody's going to be able to find it. And that's a risk that you're absolutely going to be running. So if you find a system and you keep it to yourself to run a profit on that until other people, or until you've been able to kind of tap out the resources in that system, yeah, I think that's a risk you're going to run. Because if you find it, try and profit off of it, but then I find it, then sell the location, then I become the famous one for finding it. I also can then sell that information and make a profit off of that. Now, if you find somebody's like secret base, I think that's kind of that emergent, exciting gameplay where, there may be people that saw that you found it and they're trying to hunt you down before you can get that information to authorities so they can then go, take care of that base. Those types of things are going to be in there. You could absolutely keep anything you find a secret. It's not going to be like it's automatically uploaded somewhere. But you run the risk, and you have to kind of decide where that value is. It's on a smaller scale, it's kind of the same thing. If you're out exploring and you find a derelict bangle, you don't have to tell anybody about that derelict bangle. You could just tell you and your buddy, you guys could try and repair it and then own that bangle. Or at least control that bangle, But whenever you do that, there's always the possibility that somebody else could do that. So, if you find something that's too big for you, you may be in a better situation where selling it then gets you more profit, as opposed to trying to capitalize on whatever you've discovered. So there's different ways that you can do it, but absolutely somebody would be able to find it, and you always run that risk if you don't, act on whatever you find immediately. Geode has kind of a long question, so I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. But first off, congratulations on your news. Thank you. We're obviously very excited about having the new addition in the house. Question is about the Sabre and whether it's considered absolutely overpowered. Says that he spends a lot of time in Arena Commander, sees a lot of different people flying the Sabre. It seems to dominate Hornets, Gladiuses, the Sheehan Scout, a variety of other ships. And it seems like the only way to fight a Sabre is with a Sabre. So basically he wants to know, do I think the Sabre's overpowered? Are there plans to nerf it? What's the best strategy for some of these other ships to take it on? And finally, is there a set of Battle Royale to exclude or limit their numbers? So with the Sabre, I think it's in I think it's in a pretty good spot. I would not say the Sabre is overpowered. And I think one thing that you really need to consider with all this is pilot skill and pilot comfort comfort level. So, for example, if you've got a pilot that prefers a more maneuverable ship and wants a ship with decent firepower, then the Sabre is a natural fit for them. When you start talking about somebody that wants the most weapons and the most durability, then a Super Hornet's going to be the more natural fit for them. And when you consider the overall scope of Arena Commander, it's a little bit limited in what you've got. You don't have a lot of ships with a second person that can use a turret that can help to kind of prevent people. So, like a Redeemer maybe end up being a good option to take on something like a Sabre. Not necessarily because it's capable of doing it by just the pilot, but when you get those additional turret slots that are in there, as well as using the missiles, as well as having a bigger scope, as well as having support fighters, when you start talking about the universe, the game that we're really working towards, that's where balancing really needs to take place. And when we see things that are in Arena Commander right now, it is a small-scale combat simulation. And there are ships that are going to be best in that situation. And when you start talking about in the open universe, there's only going to be ships that are best in their intended role. So like the Sabre is a light, stealthy attack craft. So if you're talking about specifically what's the best light, stealthy attack craft, that's always going to be the Sabre. But when you're talking about the overall scope of the universe, that's where things start to change. Because there's going to be situations where something like an M50 may be better, like in a race or info running, a Herald is going to do a better job. And there's going to be more variety of gameplay that you have to be prepared for. So you need to either A, have a ship that's capable of doing everything, or B, bring the right ship for the right situation. So I think what you see in Arena Commander kind of, it kind of exasperates what the actual, it just makes whatever issue you're seeing as far as balance a little worse, because it is so focused. That role is highlighted in that type of situation. So as far as it being overpowered, I don't think that it is. I think it's just really good for what Arena Commander is right now. But as far as plans to nerf it, I don't think there's necessarily plans to say the Sabre's too good, we need to knock it down a few notches. I think it's going to be more as the item ports continue to be adjusted and the different levels of components and the redundancy are implemented. Those are going to be things that I think are going to continue to kind of balance out all of the ships. So for example, we know the Sabre has those redundant systems, and if we look at the way the shields perform, are the redundant shields all powering at the same time to equate a larger shield, or are they all going to be running that would be concurrently, or are they going to be running as backup systems to where if one goes down then the next one turns on, and if that goes down the next one turns on? That would be a less powerful shield, lowering the overall durability of the ship in the short term, but keeping it alive in the longer term. So it just kind of depends on what they want to do with it, but I think that's going to be a change you see to all of the ships, not just the Sabre. So, yes, in your situation, I think the Sabre is a natural choice, and you're going to see people that are navigating to the ship that's best in the situation. It's kind of like those flavor of the month setups that you see as far as people using like broadswords or tarantulas, just because they do really well right now. So, and the other thing is, when you get it, the other thing that kind of makes things worse is because people can use the ballistics right now in Arena Commander because there's no cost associated with it. And they are the most powerful. But when you start talking about the persistent, and you can use big ones, you can use size 3s on the Sabre. But when you start talking about the persistent universe, you may not want to bring those, and if that's the case, then you're bringing laser repeaters or something like that, so you're not having to pay for the ammo or running the risk of running out. That may end up being a balancing factor in the end, too. So there's a lot more to it than just Arena Commander, and I think those are important things that we need to consider when we talk about whether it's overpowered or not. Night Shadow says, I'd like to know if there's drone ships, and if so, what would win in a 1v1 with the same skilled pilot, Vanguard versus Gladius, Vanguard versus Super Hornet, Vanguard versus Sabre. Okay, so basically he's looking for an escort role and would need to know what will win fights tanky and good, but fly like a headless chicken or fast and agile. Okay, so this question's confusing as heck, Shadow, so I'm going to try my best to answer this. As far as drone ships, the only drones that I think we're really going to see are going to be support things like cargo or salvage or maybe exploration. or maybe even repairs. Like, I think those support things are going to be what we see. I think when you start talking about combat, the closest drone that you're going to see is actually like an automated turret or like a point defense system that's actually on a ship. I don't think you're going to see drones like you push a button on a on a javelin and all of a sudden you're unleashing 3 to 4 fighters that are all going to be capable of just flying on their own. That would be more in the NPC category. Now, as far as an escort ship that will win fights that's tanky and good but fly well, I'd like the question above. I think the Sabre's a pretty good option there. I think if you want to talk about tanky, the Super Hornet, it isn't a real agile or super nimble or fast ship, but it handles well. The Mustang Delta's in that category as well. It's not tanky, but it flies really well. The 350R, for example, flies really well. It's not tanky, but it can avoid fire. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish what you're talking about, but if you're talking that combination of durability and flying well, then the Sabre is probably in that category, and is probably your best option. As far as what's going to win in your situations, it all depends on pilot skill. Vanguard versus Gladius. If the Gladius gets its improvements on flight mechanics, that's a big if. It should be able to stay out of some of the firing arcs of the Vanguard, but does the Vanguard work well with the turret gunner that it's got? Vanguard versus Super Hornet, it's kind of the same question. Vanguard versus Sabre, kind of the same question. It's all about the pilot skill. Ultimately, if you've got a really good pilot in an Aurora and a decent pilot in a Sabre, the Aurora is probably going to win. There's no I win ship. It's about the right ship in the right situation with the right person. And ultimately, it's going to come down to what is best for you and what you prefer. Because some people like that tank of a Super Hornet. Some people like the agility of the M50. And there's going to be people that are better in different ships based on how they fly, their control schemes, whether you're using mouse and keyboard or HOTAS or an Xbox controller. There's so many factors that you can't really just say ship versus ship because there's just too much that goes into that. And for the last question, we've got William Podol. Got a question: how will communicating with other players work in the universe? Will proximity, voice chat, ship-to-ship comms, etc. be a feature? Yes. That was mentioned recently as something that they're working on. I think it's something we're all really excited to see. I think it's probably going to be in some sort of hailing fashion. I don't think it's going to be just because you're close, all of a sudden you hear whatever they're saying. It's probably going to be more like, I don't know, Super Hornets calling the Andromeda, and then all of a sudden it becomes, you and the Andromeda, what are your intentions, what are you doing? There is going to be voice chat, there is going to be text chat, and it's something that's being fleshed out by CIG right now, so hopefully it's something we have in the game soon. So that's it for now. Stay tuned for a whole lot more content that'll be coming soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.